got a Bible, I'd love you to turn to Matthew chapter 16. I'm not sure about it. Sure says I am. Hear me out?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Right. No? Some can? Can you hear me now? No? Some are hearing me. Testing. How many are hearing me through your earpiece? Okay, that's enough. That tells me it's actually working.
It comes and goes.
Yeah, you can just turn it off. And if you can hear me, then you can just turn it off. How about it?
I would have gotten it.
Okay. So if you can use your imagination, in front of that cave was a large temple to God Pan. You can see a bunch of niches where there would be idols. There's a very large one there, and then above, various niches. There would be a very large temple there and a temple complex here. You can see that it's kind of caved in. There was a very significant earthquake that even changed the water. All of this water really is coming from Mount Hermon, the mountain you can see with the snow, but it kind of comes down and there's a bunch of springs that come up. Before a large earthquake, at the end of I think it was at the end of the 1st century, water came actually out of the cave, and so they built this temple right over where this huge mass of water was coming out. It was from Mount Hermon. And Caesar Augustus gave this site to Herod the Great in 20 BC. And to honor Caesar, Herod built this temple here with this powerful spring that came out of it. When Herod split up his kingdom at the end of his life, this was given to his son Philip, and he named it Caesarea Philippi, after himself and after Caesar. So with that in mind, and this massive temple, in fact, I think, there's a drawing that you'll see there that will kind of give you a sense of what it may have looked like. But all of this stuff you see around, and especially the stuff I walked you by, was all pillars from this whole temple complex. That you can see this probably the result of that earthquake or other earthquakes that has brought. You just need to bring this level up to where we are so that John and I are on the same floor. This was not excavation. This was a natural destruction through an earthquake that took all this down. Matthew 16. With that in mind, let's read this story. Matthew 16. Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi. He asked the disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" It's interesting to me that Matthew is the one who began chapter 2 by saying, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of Herod the Great, also wants us to know where we are when this story comes up. And I don't think it's insignificant that Matthew places this story at this location. That it was at Caesarea Philippi. So many of Jesus' teachings, we don't know where he was, or he's moving from one place to another. As Adam has said as we've gone along, well, supposedly the multiplication of fish took place, bread and fish took place there. We don't know. The Sermon on the Mount took place there. We don't know. But this we know. It was here at Caesarea Philippi. And again, with that underground spring that was there, now the springs are still coming out. They're just not all gushing out of the cave. And in Israel, water is overwhelming. It's they weren't in ancient days. They weren't like they were scared of deep water. It was like some believe that deep water was the place of the underworld. That Hades would be found at the bottom of deep water. Josephus claims that this. We talk a lot about Josephus. He claims this cave was so deep, the spring was so deep, that there was no rope long enough to measure the depth of this cave and where this water was coming from. So that's the physical context for this story. And Jesus just asked, "Who do people say I am?" Verse 14. They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." That's interesting, but Jesus really has another question he really wants to ask. But what about you? Who do you say I am? And Peter's mouth's always getting him into trouble, but this moment he gets it right. Simon Peter said, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." got it exactly right. The promised Messiah, the anointed one, who the prophets were always saying is coming. This is who we believe you are. And I love the reply of Jesus, and they made this reply at Caesarea Philippi. Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." So he's saying to Peter, number one, you got it right. Number two, you didn't figure this out on your own. God told you this. And then he says, I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Now let's talk about this just for a minute. The location we know is Caesarea Philippi. We're gonna the old town is over there. We're gonna walk through Agrippa's palace just over the hill here. So was he right at this rock face? We don't know. This would certainly be a very huge attraction, and with rock being so much the theme of this talk, Matthew choosing to contextualize it in this geographic city, it makes sense that it was somewhere near here that Jesus decides to say, your name is Peter, which means rock, and on this rock I will build my church. Now, the Catholic Church uses this to indicate that Peter was the Pope, and that he names Peter the Rock, which is what his name means. But others would say that the more Protestant view is that what the rock is not Peter himself, but the statement Jesus made, that you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. That's the rock on which the church is built. It's not built on who Peter is, it's built on what Peter said. And either one, which one is right, either interpretation works with the flow of the text. But notice how the verse ends, on this rock, and I think this statement of me being the Messiah, the Son of God, on that statement, I will build my church. Then he says, the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Remember what was believed in ancient days, that this cave was so deep that maybe even the origins of the underworld, or Hades, was here. And some would even say, I've read a couple of people that say that there was a nickname for this place called the Gates of Hades. I don't know if that's true. But it's a fascinating option to me. Hades is the god of the underworld, the location of death. And so that statement is significant. Peter makes the first pronouncement, you are the Christ, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And this time, instead of saying, tell no one, Jesus acknowledges the statement. It says his church, on this statement, his church would be built. And he points towards one of the great fears of death itself, the underworld itself, eternal punishment. Maybe standing here looking at this massive temple built by Herod the Great. And it makes this statement. Again, the Jewish people tended to fear large bodies of water. They referred to the sea as the abyss, saw it as a symbol of chaos or a symbol of hell. The Sea of Galilee, of course, looks calm and beautiful, but when storms came, they viewed it as a place of darkness and chaos, and there was a lot of fear. And I think about the evilness of our world, and if you take with the evilness around us, it's fascinating to me that Jesus says, on this statement, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. On this statement, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. And that statement feels a little bit contradictory because gates are defensive. They're not offensive. They're defensive. You don't have gates that move forward. You have gates that keep people out. So the message to me, it seems like when you say the gates of Hades will not overcome the church, I think sometimes we reverse it. And we Christians tend to be on the defensive. And we're always nervous about, however people mean it, the world infiltrating us, and we're defensive against it. We're trying to keep everybody out. And, I don't think that's how God ever intended it to be. The intention is that we're infiltrating the evil world, and we're making an impact. And that evil world can't keep out the influence of the church when the church is being the group of people that God has called the church to be. And the gates of hell is not to prevail against it. And why? Because Jesus is the Messiah, the anointed one, the Holy One of God. And on the basis of who he is, every promise that he has made will come true. And that gives us a courage that we cannot have on our own. In the Bible reading plan, the last couple of videos I've made talk a lot about like I just did Psalm, was it 27 for tomorrow morning? And one of the Psalms, that Psalms begins with, the Lord is my rock and my salvation. Of whom shall I fear? Of whom shall I be afraid? Many times we think that the opposite of fear is courage. The Bible never says the opposite of fear is courage, ever. That's what our culture says. The opposite of fear in the Bible is two things, trust and love. John says that it's perfect love that drives out fear. And our culture says, you've got fear, then build up courage. Well, based on what? And that's why I love Psalm 27 says, the Lord is my rock, my stronghold. Therefore, of whom shall I be afraid? The answer to fear. And living in a culture, there are a lot of Christians, and this is, Facebook makes it really clear. There are a lot of Christians that seem to have a lot of fear about what's happening around. And the solution to fear is not courage. The solution to fear is trust. That God is a rock. Jesus is the Messiah, and he will win. And here we are at yet another place that Herod the Great built that was incredibly impressive. That they came up, I don't know how many miles from Capernaum to be in this place. Jesus is traveling around Galilee, teaching in all the synagogues, healing the sick. He would have come here too. But as they come in here, what's the most impressive thing about this city? It is not the synagogue. It's the palace of Herod the Great's grandson eventually. But in Jesus' day, it would have been this temple that sat right here to the God of heaven. When you compare the synagogue that was there for the worship of God that was built here, compared to this, there's no competition. So everything about what you see says, Pan wins. God doesn't matter. And Jesus asked Peter a question directly. Who do others say that I am? He didn't really care about that answer. Who do you say that I am? And I think in the daily throes of life, reminding ourselves who is Jesus. He's the chosen one. Every prophecy made about the future will come true, and God will win. And it's based on the rock of who Jesus is. He is the Messiah. And standing here in front of this rock face that was dedicated to what they thought was a powerful God who controlled the gates of hell itself, it's a reminder. Even the church will win against what the culture thinks is the most powerful, important thing. And that's what I think is the lesson for us as we sit here at Caesarea Philippi from Matthew chapter 16. Because I wrote down a couple of statements. Because Jesus is the Christ, I can have peace in the evil world and environment. Because Jesus is the Christ, can have confidence that God's church will prevail. Because Jesus is the Christ, being depressed over the culture should never be a predominant feeling, because God will win. And because Jesus is the Christ, I don't need to fear the enemy, because every enemy will be fully and finally defeated. So we need to believe in it, rejoice in it, that he is the rock. Psalm 27. Because God is my rock, he is my fortress. Of whom shall I be afraid? Whom shall I fear? And it may not feel right now, but nothing will overcome his truth. So let's remind ourselves by singing the truth about that. We're going to sing Build My Life. Build My Life. If you want to look at that in your lyrics. Let's sing that together against this impressive story.